Good evening, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 17 of fiscal year 22 of the Advisory Finance Committee. Today is February 9th, 2023. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote access in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the meeting location indicated on the agenda, which was posted, and it is possible that any or all members of the public body may attend remotely with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. The meeting may also be accessed remotely via the link posted. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely as noted above. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Westborough TV, Verizon Channel 28, or Charter Channel 192, and concurrently recorded, and as soon as possible after the meeting, posted on youtube.com/Westborough TV. We'll hold off on the approval of the minutes until near the end of the meeting in the interest of everybody's time. We have two guests tonight, and we have Westborough Town Manager Christy Williams, who is entering as we speak, and Recreation Director Jen Kirkland. So, Christy, thank you for being here. We'll give you a chance to get yourself settled. And
Am I going to start?
well, what we thought we'd do in the best interest and utilization of time is just to start with the articles and go through them, and Jen will have an opportunity to jump in the middle when her article number comes up.
Sounds good.
Okay, so just bear with us, folks, while the town manager gets herself prepared.
That was still on version 5, right? Yeah, okay.
Oh, it looks like Jen's on, so. Mike, it looks like Jen is on, so I don't know
Yeah, she is on.
Oh, is she waiting for?
Yeah, she was a few minutes ago when she came up on the screen.
Yeah, I see her.
Yeah, oh, here we are. Hi, Jen. Okay, so when you're ready, Christy, we can get started, beginning with Article 5.
Okay, so,
And for recording purposes, Article 5 at the moment is a placeholder article, and the subject is union contracts.
okay. So I have some stuff to show on other articles, so I'll just hold on to that.
Okay.
Article 5, as you mentioned, is for FY23 funding of current contracts. I think some of you might remember that when we were going into fiscal 23, we had acknowledged that we had four open contracts at the time. We did settle one and funded that one previously, and then there were 3 more outstanding. But all of them expired at the end of fiscal 22. So the ones that we're settling now have a year behind. So any retro pay for fiscal 23 would need to be paid out of free cash. And then any COLAs for fiscal 24 or any expenses for fiscal 24 would go into the fiscal 24 budget, which will show up in that article for the town meeting, assuming that we're settled. So we're not fully settled for those 3 additional contracts yet.
So
Also, I should say, fire department contract expires at the end of fiscal 23. So we also do not have those numbers in fiscal 24 because we have not settled that contract yet.
So, just to clarify, for the money in fiscal 24, are you going to add that to the budget that will be presented, or is that going to get lumped in here to keep those other numbers the way they were?
No, so this article would be purely for current year,
For
fiscal
current year only,
23. And
okay.
it would be a free cash because obviously we can't
Oh,
raise and appropriate for fiscal 23 anymore. Assuming that if the contracts are settled prior to town meeting, then we would move those fiscal 24 numbers into that budget article. Yes.
So the budgets would adjust from what they are in the budget book by this amount?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect,
Yep.
thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Next article is Article 6, funding the stabilization reserve account. And the request is 1.82 million.
Okay. I have several slides that I can
Yeah.
show. Otherwise, I can answer questions. Actually, let's get settled first.
Let's see what she says first, and then we can.
So I put these slides together to answer questions. So some of them we might be able to move through more quickly, depending on what your questions are.
Perfect.
Why it looks like that. No, I can't see it. No, we can't see it. Okay. So as I'm figuring this out,
Yeah, it's okay.
we can.
It was there for a second.
I know.
Here.
There's these computers.
Psyching you out.
There's also a training line item for me to figure out how to use this.
It's in your goals.
You know what, fully endorsed at this point.
Right. Come on.
That and unmuting yourself during
Do-
Zoom meetings.
Do we need,
Sorry, hang on one second. Let me see if I can figure it out. So this year, as you all know, we had a higher amount of free cash certified than typically, just under $16 million. And so we have spent some of that free cash at the October town meeting, but we do typically spend most of our free cash at the annual town meeting where we fund our capital plan. One of the things that one of the goals of the comprehensive fiscal management policy is that we have 5 to 7% of our general fund operating budget equal to that amount in free cash, and then equal to that amount in stabilization, with a combined range of 10 to 15% of our general fund operating budget. We're slightly over that going into town meeting, again, understanding that this is when we use most of our free cash. One of the things that we've talked about many times is that while our free cash is high, our stabilization does not meet that 5 to 7%. And so, so this is a request to put $1.8 million from free cash into stabilization. That would get us to 5% based on fiscal 23 budget. The reason we're using fiscal 23 budget is because of what we just talked about. There's still some unknown numbers for fiscal 24. So we're basing it on fiscal 23. If using the current numbers for fiscal 24, it would get us to just under 5%, and then something we could look at, doing more in the future. But obviously, those percentages chase the budget number. So if we get to 5, assuming the budget goes up in fiscal 25, we would be chasing that. So I can start answering questions. It's still not.
so at the select board meeting, you gave a quick review of stabilization funds in general, what they are and the purposes they serve.
Yep.
I'm not sure that our wealth of folks that view our meetings, or
Your fans.
may have seen that select board meeting.
Sure.
So could you go through that again?
Yep. Actually, stabilization funds and free cash are defined in the budget document. So just pointing people back to that glossary in the budget document. And then also stabilization is also defined in your report and recommendation. So
Right.
you all know that, but for the viewing public, stabilization is money that is what you might hear people refer to as a rainy day fund. And so that is that money can be invested, unlike free cash that doesn't get invested. And then also it can be appropriated by town meeting by a 2/3 vote. So we have recently taken money out of stabilization accounts, for example, to fund the Affordable Housing Trust. That is a different stabilization account. So the town can have multiple. When we say stabilization account, we're sort of talking about this general stabilization account, our rainy day fund. There's others. There's the Del Webb Chauncey stabilization account. And then there's also the mitigation stabilization account. And then we also have actually a capital stabilization account, but we haven't put money into that or used that in a couple of years. So this transfer would transfer free cash, which can be appropriated, as you know, by majority vote of town meeting, into the stabilization fund, where again the funds are invested, and it requires a 2/3 vote in the future to appropriate money out of the stabilization account. We heard a lot about stabilization accounts, especially at the state level during COVID, because it's your rainy day fund, and that was a rainy day, many rainy days. And so, the state, it's always been best practice to have reserves, of course, but the state really talked a lot about the need for those reserves in these types of situations. Westborough was fortunate to not have to draw on our reserves, but I think we need to keep in mind that we didn't need to draw on our reserves because we cut budgets pretty significantly. But because we have such healthy reserves, we were able to fund our capital plan. We didn't do it at the annual meeting, but we did fund our capital plan at the October town meeting that year. So just an example of why healthy reserves, in that case it was free cash, but healthy reserves, will help us going forward, and has recently helped us. So.
Gene?
You mentioned that we didn't draw down on the stabilization accounts during COVID.
Correct.
So why has it been underfunded? Or why isn't it meeting the targets yet, with free cash being sort of above target?
We haven't gone to town meeting to add money to the stabilization, and again, we're chasing that number as the budget got bigger. I've worked in Westborough now for 12 years. I don't think we've transferred money in those 12 years into stabilization. Given sort of where we're at and the discussion, we certainly, and knowing what we know about the fact that we could have a need, we want to make sure that we're transferring. What we have always followed is that 10 to 15% combined.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to, now we're looking a little closer at those individual ranges.
The number is a little is very specific as opposed to a round number.
Yes.
Is that to bring us up exactly to 7% or?
Five.
5?
Based on FY23.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Okay. Any other questions, Beth or Andrew?
Yeah, hang on. Am I mute? Yeah, no, I'm not. Is there a reason why we don't do a round number like 2 million? Because we have more free cash right now, and then not chase it quite as badly? I mean, we've ignored the stabilization fund, I think, the entire time I've been on the AFC, and unless we're going to start a practice of regularly depositing a small amount, that would be my question is, rather than let it sit for a long time, further funded because our free cash was doing fine.
I think that we're basing that number on our fiscal management policy. And I think that there's there's not a need to do a round, if the only reason to do a round number is to make it a round number, I don't think that that
Right.
makes sense. I think that, you know, we based it on our FY23 budget. We based it on the lower range because we don't want to do a big jump and lose a lot of our free cash. We're still within that 10 to 15%. And so I think that we think that it's a responsible approach.
Yeah, but do we think we're gonna add to it in future years now that we've looked at it and become aware of it?
I think we've been aware of it all along. I think that we just haven't decided to make that transfer. And so, I think it will be looked at annually. And if I could get this presentation to work, I would show you that, you know, you can't count on the generation of free cash. So I can commit to you that we always look at it, but I can't commit that every year we'll be recommending a transfer.
Okay. I mean, that's the status that we've been at since I've been on the board, and I just wondered if, because we had an excess of free cash, if this was the year, you know, to look ahead and say like, okay, let's just be nice to ourselves this year. But
I think it's important to not, I mean, I don't think that we should take away we shouldn't take away the fact that we're continuing to have reserves. So we're just moving it from sort of one savings account to the other. The other savings account is a little bit more difficult to spend. That's the stabilization fund. So we're not depleting our reserves. We're just moving it over and we're able to invest it. You know, we shouldn't count on that much free cash in the future. I think we should continue to look at it. We are also we're proposing to spend a lot more free cash than we have in the past. So I think we need to be cognizant of all of those sort of levers that we're pulling when it's relating to free cash.
Okay.
So can I ask you, the difference between, in my mind, a rainy day fund versus, in this case, stabilization, rainy day, sometimes you add to continually. And I'm wondering why, let's say, the fire department generates revenue with ambulance runs, sometimes in excess of what we anticipate. Why, and we know that they're going to have big ticket purchases. Why wouldn't we construct kind of a system of continually putting money in, then I guess to Beth's point of chasing it kind of after the fact?
But I guess I don't. So I appreciate that, you know, that all the departments have, or most of the departments have generate revenue because of the service that they provide. As you know, that money comes back, most of it comes back into, you know, most of it is used to reduce the levy, which is the burden that every taxpayer has. And so putting money into that stabilization as a rainy day fund would make it harder to spend on fire apparatus in the future, right? Because it requires a 2/3 vote as opposed to a majority vote. So that's one piece of information. Okay. The other is we did previously start putting money into capital stabilization funds. So capital stabilization, which would be used in the future for like a fire department apparatus, and has been. Because we were funding it annually, it was viewed as an operating cost, so we actually funded it through raise and appropriate. Again, all of these stabilization funds are reserves that we can draw on for those types of purchases, so.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, moving on to Article 7A, reserve funds. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm happy to move on. I'm just wondering if when Jen is presenting, I can go down. I'm trying to get to my computer down there through this computer. I would love to show you some of the slides.
We can go to Jen.
Let's just go to Jen.
Okay, let me
Jen,
just,
are you
then I
ready?
can show you the slides related to that
All
question.
right, Jen.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for being with us.
Christy, I'll stretch my questions.
And I hope you're feeling,
Oh yeah, no, I'm okay. It's just a head cold, but I woke up today feeling a lot worse than I had all week, so I figured this was better.
thank you. Thank you for your courtesy of
Yeah.
not being here in person. We appreciate
Sure.
that. Yeah.
So I understand you wanted all three of our articles, so I have some slides, but I don't know how you want to proceed.
No, go ahead. Just go with your slide presentation. And
Okay. Oh, can I share my screen or?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
we have an expert with us tonight, so.
Should be a green button at the bottom.
Yeah, it's not, oh, now it's working, great.
So,
All right, so we'll start with the golf course. Come on. No, go back. All right, so this is just, I wanted to start by just reminding everyone of like what the golf course's goals and missions are. We always want to provide a premier golf experience for both members and guests. We do that by providing a quality product, which is the golf course itself. The product has to be maintained and cared for consistently, and there's a variety of equipment that is required to deliver a plush green golf course that people want to play at. So the first ask on our capital improvement plan is for this tractor. The current tractor is 30 years old. We've gotten as much life out of it as we can. So we need a new one. This tractor, our superintendent uses it for really any and everything. It helps with maintenance with other vehicles. It'll help remove debris from the course, plowing snow in certain cases. It's just kind of used for a lot of different things at the golf course. Pretty straightforward. Happy to answer any questions about this.
what did you say the age of the machinery is?
It's 30 years old.
And what was the expected, or do you know the expected life?
About 20 years, so we got an extra 10 out of it. So these are good, usually between 20. If you get 20 years out of it, you've got your money's worth. So we got 30.
Anybody want to rebuy that?
Are you buying a
Not
new
for
one?
us, I meant neighboring towns, are we
Salvage
gonna-
value.
Yeah,
Salvage value, yeah. I don't know.
Does it have value to the DPW at this point?
I'm not sure. I don't think it would, just because of how old it is. I could certainly check that.
It might be worth
Yep.
having a conversation with Chris.
And are you purchasing a new one?
Yeah, well, I believe the model is it's not brand new, no. I think it was a 2005.
That doesn't, I mean, that seems like we're halfway through its usable life then.
yeah.
Yeah, let me see.
That's a
Sorry,
big,
hold on.
at this point.
If I can find the year, because that could be wrong. Sorry. I can look through and see before I jump off what the year is and get that info.
I think that would be important to know whether
Yeah.
this is new or used, because 2005, for example, is literally halfway through its
Yeah.
expected life,
Agreed.
if not more.
Actually, 3/4 of the way through, but.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's kind of
Fast, you
nice
should
to-
know.
Yeah, sorry. I don't have it here. I just put a text into my superintendent, so I don't know if you want to keep going, and I'm sure he'll get right back to me, since I couldn't find it. But if there's any other questions about this, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, I guess the follow-up question is gonna be, if it's used, what does it cost new?
Okay.
And what is the turnaround time between the time you order it and the time you receive it? Which seems to be the capital issue for vehicles right now.
Yeah, so I do know that our superintendent didn't foresee, like, if we were to purchase this right after Springtown meeting, he was confident that he'd be able to get it for the summer. There didn't seem to be too big of a lead time.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay,
All right.
Andrew here,
Yes.
I got my hand up, sorry.
sorry,
Hard to see.
Andrew.
A couple of things. Number one, this was originally a 25 article that was pulled forward to 24. And I noticed because of some other changes that just happened from the Capital Expense Planning Committee. Jen, just as you know, hot breaking news, we approved the recommendation to go for what you're presenting today with a change. But I guess the question that I have comes based on Beth's conversations. The original estimate for this on 25 was 65,000, whereas this is 50,000. And obviously, how old it's going to be is going to make a difference. But I wondered if the 65,000 originally estimated for this was going to be for a new vehicle.
Yeah, no, it was always, he has a quote, for, and I don't see the year on this, sorry, I'm going through back in my email here. The quote is for, 46, and so 50 he's confident, I've talked to, our superintendent multiple times about this, that 50,000 will be enough to purchase the tractor that we need.
But if you're purchasing a used one, what's your life expectancy for this? I'd like to know what the life expectancy of this $50,000 worth is. Because, versus
Yep.
a new one.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I had it way wrong. He just texted me back. It's likely gonna be a 2022, and then that would be the
Yeah.
20 years.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Even when I said, I must have seen 2005 on something else.
There's a 22.
But yeah, 22, it'll be a 2022, and yeah, we'll get 20 years.
Yeah, that's good.
I thought so,
Okay.
Yeah,
50.
and that was what
That's
he
a
had.
whole lot better.
Yeah, and that's what he had the quote for as well. So we should be good.
Okay, well, that does give everybody a little bit more breathing room. Any other questions? Andrew, your hand is still up. You have another? I guess not. Okay,
No, I was just stretching.
okay. Okay, let's go on with your presentation, please, Jen.
All right. So the next one here is, and he did just confirm that these are in stock, so we shouldn't have any delays when we go to order for the tractor. So this next item that we're looking for is a golf simulator. Our new Golf Pro has a lot of ideas and ways that he wants to try to maximize play of the golf course year round, and a simulator is one of the ways to do that. So a golf simulator is basically, and it's a high-tech system that enables golfers to practice golf inside. You can extend play into the winter months. You can do, there's different types of programming, from leagues to youth programs to lessons. Our golf manager would be able to fit people for clubs. There is a whole slew of things that you can do with this system. One of our goals, like I said, is to try to enhance revenue anywhere we can, enhance our services. The golf course is open from roughly March to we close this year in December, but for those months where we are off, January, February, having something like this would be huge, to just be able to offer to members and guests alike. Our preliminary plan would be to start small and open just in the off season. Although once we get going, I don't see why we couldn't, if we had a rainy week, we could certainly use this during that week. But our preliminary plan, like I said, is to start small, a few days a week for a few hours. These systems don't require a ton of maintenance or staff. They're really user-friendly. Once, people get accustomed to them, we would probably have a staff person there, but it's not like you need like 3, 4, 5 people there to run this. We're projecting revenue of very, very conservative numbers, around $5,000 to $6,000 additional. But Matt and I have talked, and we think there is just, kind of sky's the limit if we were to have something like this, to just continue to brainstorm and offer different programs and services.
Questions?
Sure.
I do. I have
How many
several.
people can utilize this at a time, or
I'm sorry, one more time, Beth, I missed the
how many
beginning.
people essentially could utilize this I'll say at a time or at a session?
So it's just like when you're playing golf, so I would assume up to 4 people. It's literally like you're playing golf but inside. So the most we allow on the course at a time is 4, but you can, typically you book it by like the hour or two. And you can book parties. Like I said, there's different like leagues, so that would even end up being more people. It's really customizable from what I understand.
Melanie?
So do you have an idea of what you're going to charge per hour?
Some beginning conversations and beginning research that I've looked at, it's between $35 and $50 an hour. I would say we'd probably trend lower on the $35 end. But then again, like I said, Matt, our golf manager and I have talked, if we were going to do a league, maybe that's just a flat fee. If we were going to do like a fitting, or he was going to fit somebody for golf clubs, that would probably be a different fee. We haven't really gotten into the weeds of what, exactly how we would program it and what we would charge. But that projected kind of revenue between the 5,000 and 6,000 was based on just an hourly fee of $35.
Okay. Do you know how many simulators are in the area?
I don't. I believe there's one in Framingham, or there used to be like a whole facility. I don't know of any golf course that actually has one, so we would probably be one of a very few, especially a municipal golf course to have one. We'd be ahead of the times, I think.
So I looked at the concept in the area. So there's a Dr. Green's in Ashland.
Mm-hmm.
There's X Golf in Worcester. We have 4 here in Westborough. New England Indoor Golf in Auburn. Natick's Golf Galaxy has a performance center. It seems like the market's kind of saturated for us to go ahead and invest $50,000 at this time. I don't know.
I think those are definitely facilities. I just think, there are other places, but I think to have one at our golf course is just another service, and service to our members. That's sort of like our kind of thinking about it. It's just that I think one of the goals that we've talked about, and I think other people expect from the golf course, is just programming year round. And with weather being such a factor here, we're not in Florida. We can't keep the golf course open 12 months out of the year. Having something like this is a way to do that. Just to kind of that was kind of our thought. Okay. That we're not necessarily trying to compete with these other places. It's just another way for us to bring in revenue to our golf course, to offer a service to our players.
And I know you mentioned that they're low maintenance, but it runs on lasers, right?
Yes.
And the lasers have to be recalibrated when balls go astray, clubs go astray, that kind of thing?
I don't know the specifics of all of that. I know that somebody comes and, sets it all up for us. We have a rep that we would work with to kind of get it all set up. But from my conversations with our golf manager, who has a lot more experience, they seem to be pretty low maintenance once they're up and running.
So is this I'm sorry, Andrew, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Beth, go ahead.
Okay, is this a significantly better than a home version golf simulator now that everybody's playing with their own toys at home?
Yes, much better. It feels like I'm told that you're actually on a golf course. You can see in that picture, it's like an ocean. You're there. And I think it's a social aspect too. People come out, it's the same, you get the same benefits as if you were gonna play golf with a group of your friends.
Except the walking.
Except the walking, so maybe it's better. You don't have to lug your clubs.
Wait, I have one more. Are you going to offer food and beverage?
That would be the hope that, we would operate like we do now with the golf course. So right now we have some snacks and, soda available for sale. And in the future, as things develop, we would hope to be able to partner you know, and work with whatever happens with, you know, the restaurant side of the building or whatever, and eventually offer food and beverage, yeah.
Christie, do you have something to add?
I was just gonna say, you know, generally that, well, I echo what Jen said, so that's why I sat down, but about offering food and beverage. Obviously, we don't know yet what will happen with the building, but that, you know, we do have some ideas about how there might be, you know, food available during the golf season or during the warmer months. And then, you know, as Jen said, they do have snacks and drinks. But I just wanted to add that, you know, the town made a decision a couple years ago that we wanted to move the golf course under a town department, and this is a great example of why. And that's that the recreation department, in conjunction with the golf pro, can really program this area that doesn't get programmed at all. I mean, really doesn't serve the community for those couple months out of the year, beyond the restaurant, which obviously is a different type of business.
So maybe one of our members who is absent asked that this question be asked. Why should we spend money now on a golf simulator if we don't know the long-term viability of the building at this point?
So my understanding of the golf simulator is that it can be moved, and so it's not that if you once it's installed that it would, you know, it would sort of go with the building. You know, I think, as we all know, these building projects can be long-term, and we don't know, you know, and it's going to take some time to figure out exactly what the building is, but we do know that it's going to support the golf course, and this supports the golf course.
Okay. Jen,
Yep.
you've kind of estimated what you might charge per hour at this point, but has anybody done any potential revenue projections and when this piece of equipment might be paid off, all things considered, including, you know, the initial fees for installing and maintenance and so forth? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what kind of money are we looking at earning for the golf course, for the town? And how long is it gonna take us to earn at least enough to pay this off?
I think I mean, I don't speak for Jen, and she'll probably give you a better answer, but, you know, it's difficult to know. I mean, this is an amenity that we'd be bringing in, where we could bring money into to an area, use an area that we can't use during the winter months.
Yeah, I get
And
that.
so, no, but so, I mean, Jen doesn't, she probably can't even guess all of the ideas that she's gonna have related to programming around the simulator. So,
But there are so many, you know, Melanie's,
yes,
you know, investigation identified so many others in the area.
right.
Have we contacted them? Have we made any attempt to see what their charging mechanisms are, how much revenue they're generating on an annual basis? I mean, that would be helpful for us in terms of, you know, determining whether or not this is something we could recommend to the town
Sure.
meeting.
I mean, I guess the question is, and it's a question for Jen, and she can answer all your questions, because I can't.
All right.
But I think that there's two sort of opportunities to look at this. I mean, you know, we might install a tennis court or a pickleball court, or, you know, other sort of recreational opportunities, and we don't necessarily know what kind of revenue we're gonna get from maybe programming a lesson there or things like that. So this is an opportunity and amenity for recreation, and it would be through the town, and so it presents different opportunities for programming that a private company, you know, it's just different. You know, I've been to one of those, I know what they're like, and it's just, that's not what we're gonna have here,
Yeah,
obviously.
So there's a marketing component to this in terms of attracting more people to the course. Understood.
Sure,
But, you know, if we've got to make a decision, for example, between 50,000 for a simulator and 50,000 for a tractor, you know, that's 50,000 is 50,000.
sure, so Jen
But
can answer your
Jen,
question.
sorry.
No, I, you know, I'm gonna sort of say exactly what Christy said, honestly. I think that I know that there are other facilities in the area, but it's going to be different. I'd be happy to go and do some research. I'm just hesitant, and I think in the conversations that I've had with our golf manager, I'm hesitant to say like, oh, we're gonna make, to be perfectly transparent, I've never, you know, run a golf course. I've never had a simulator like this, so I don't know the popularity of it. And so we're just hesitant to say that, you know, we're going to project to do 15,000 next year. I just don't know. And again, I think these other simulator places are run just differently. Like, you know, they have their own, I'm sure, food, beverage, alcohol, all of that. This is just gonna be different, just how Christy said. There's so many ways we could program it. We might, you know, that we could even, we've talked about like doing maybe there's a separate membership, so that's a revenue stream. I just think there's so many, different opportunities that until we get it and we kind of do a little bit of trial and error and see what works, I don't have a revenue projection. If you'd like one before you make a decision, I could put something together. I can get with Matt and see. It's just, again, the conversations that we've had, it's just, there's so many ideas. And like Christy said, this was just a way for us to program a space that doesn't get programming, you know, 3-4 months out of the year. And it's a benefit to people that use the Westborough Golf Course.
Okay.
So that's, you know.
Andrew, then Beth.
Thank you. One other point note about this, and it has to do with the money, is that all of this stuff is being funded through golf's revenue. So I'm not saying that that's a good reason to just blow the money because we don't care, but I am saying that it's very, very different than money that would have been appropriated from folks in the town paying for something. So the folks who run the golf courses, conversations that we have in the rec committee meetings, the rec meetings that we have, the conversation is that these are business strategies and we do walk through business cases behind them. But obviously, I just want to emphasize here that the risk here is golf revenue money, not town money that would be potentially spent elsewhere in the town.
Okay, thank you. Beth?
So I did some rough calculations, and if it was used 4 hours a day, 365 days a year, at $35 an hour, it would essentially pay itself back. Now, obviously, you're not using it 365 initially. So, but if you're using it 4 months, that extends that 3 years out. And if, you know, so it doesn't seem like it's that long. I mean, I thought the $35 an hour was low, but I don't play golf. And I don't know the value of this because a home machine's only like $5,000 to $20,000. But it seemed like there's potential for good payoff if well utilized. And if we use it for school, you know, for the schools, you know, that seems like a benefit that a real paying agency isn't going to give us without charging us. I mean, for example, when we use the Westborough Swim and Tennis Club, I think there's a fee to use that pool. You know, whereas the students could use it, depending on what gets scheduled, as a benefit to the town.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I feel that if we had this and with some creativity behind it, we could generate some revenue. But I asked my questions anyway, because I think we should start interjecting some discipline into these decisions, regardless of where the money comes from. We're still spending money.
Right.
And we're still spending money that, if not used for this, could be used for something else that might later be asked to be spent by the town. So all I'm saying is, when we're making these decisions, I know in a $124 million budget, 50,000 is a minuscule percentage, but we should be asking the business questions before we go ahead as a committee and recommend one way or another. And I believe that those questions should be answered to the best.
If we purchase this, is there any subscription or ongoing fee that we need to pay? Or is this a complete kit?
It would be a complete kit.
And if you offer memberships though, right?
I was just saying that was an option we could, like, you know, we have the golf membership, maybe we do like an indoor membership. I've just kind of, like I said, thoughts that have been batted around. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
One of my big
no, I'm
concerns
just-
is while the building is down, do you already have a place in mind that will work? I mean, because it looks, you know, they're showing a big, spacious, open location.
Right.
Do we have something in town that will work while the building is under construction.
Yeah, the Great Hall.
That would be fun.
Just-
I don't
That
think
might
so.
have a conflict in terms of use of space. That's part of why I'm asking.
Right, and this was, in our plan, well before kind of news of what was gonna happen with the building.
Right.
And I think, ultimately, after the committee is put together and there's a decision that's made, I mean, I don't, if this goes to town meeting and it's approved, I'm not going out tomorrow, the day after and purchasing one. I think the responsible thing would be to kind of hold on, see what are we doing with the building? And I think Christy kind of alluded to this, but building projects can take a while. But if we get a sense that this is happening, rapid time, maybe we hold off and not purchase it until a new building is up and running, or we have a more clear plan. The news of the building just really kind of came upon us about a month ago.
So I think that the location during potential construction, maybe you talk to the school department and ask if they have a place in the gym where they could, share with you, but you should have a home for it if we're gonna purchase it while the building is out of commission, because it seems great while the building's out of commission to have something indoors that you can have. But it needs to have a viable home that meets its structural requirements.
Right.
So that maybe should be something that you can, try and get an answer to before you present at town meeting.
Okay.
At least that's my thinking. Because I don't want you to get a great big new toy and then have to set it in away for 4 years, losing all its newness before you can use it again.
Right, absolutely. No, I agree.
Anyone else?
My own last comment, if you, again, back to the membership thing, if you only have one bay and you offer memberships, I think you're going to have a lot of frustrated people because one bay locked up for an hour, if you only have it available 4 to 6 hours a day, unless you do it in 30-minute increments, in which case, I think you have to think through kind of the logistics of the usage, how popular it might be. You never know. And if that's the case, with one bay, you're going to have a lot of frustrated golfers.
Well, we wouldn't just sell an unlimited amount of memberships. I think we would assess after we, purchase this, we wouldn't just say, memberships are open. We might just limit it to the first year, 10 memberships, just for an example. I don't know. But we would certainly do some due diligence beforehand and not just open it up, willy-nilly. It wouldn't be the same as like a golf membership per se, where people can, there's no cap on that. But I think for something like this, similar to other rec programs, we have to put a cap on how many kids we can take at our sports clinics and art programs and things like that. I would assume similar to this, we would have to have a cap.
Okay, well, maybe you guys could circle back to us before
Sure.
town meeting, after you've had some additional time to,
Yep, I've taken
Think
some
through
notes,
some of
so
these
I can,
questions.
I'll come back for sure and
okay.
see what we can, I'll definitely come back to you guys.
Okay. So please continue with, I know you have one
Sure.
more article.
Yep, last one off the golf course to the lights at Haskell tennis and basketball courts. The current lights, these pictures aren't great, but you can see they're here. They're 30 years old. 2 of the lights are out and need to be replaced, and the others are on borrowed time. So after speaking with our town electrician and our facilities manager, it just makes sense that now is the time. Well, we're gonna have to replace 2 that are out. If we're gonna get the lift and do all of the work, might as well just replace all of them with some energy efficient lights, because like I said, the ones that we have now, 2 are out today, tomorrow 2 more could be out. And so we have, here you'll see that the current lights right now, the wattage is 1,075. With the new LED lights, we'd go down to 463. We'd also save $3,000 a year in our light bill with the LED lights. So it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, so like I said, it's just a matter of time before we're gonna have to do the other lights, so we just figure why not do all of them now if we're gonna do the work? And, we would be saving a little bit of money, but it's incredible how much wattage, the difference in wattage
There's
is.
one less.
I'm sorry, Beth, what?
Go ahead.
Then there's one less, so we're 13 in the
Oh,
existing.
that's a typo, it's 12.
Okay,
Sorry, I just noticed that myself.
and then, have neighbors had any opportunity, I mean, there was such, I know this is a totally different part of town,
Mhm.
and people already have these lights, and they're not LED lights, but there was such a, concern about the lights before at the high school, although LEDs pointed down obviously are better. Had the neighbors had a chance to discuss new lights?
No, we haven't. The only thing I'm just trying to say, I don't want to speak incorrectly. I don't feel like it's set up the same way as the high school where there's direct neighbors. And these lights have been here for 30 years. We don't get any complaints. So I don't
That was the
know.
question.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, was that the question? Yeah, we don't get any, we get complaints when the lights don't come on time, but that's the only thing.
Okay.
I'm curious, because there's always this green initiative in this town. Why not go for like a solar or a hybrid solar to LED? Is there such a thing?
I'm not sure, to be honest. We worked with a vendor and, we said we wanted to replace with lights with energy efficient. This is what the option was. I don't know enough about solar, or what our solar options are. This was, the option that was presented to us.
Can you look into that really briefly? I mean, like,
Sure.
anytime you do a new look, but I think that is a good call of just, what is a freestanding solar system? I mean, because our electricity is tapping into our solar, so that's not the end of the world, but having them be isolated in solar might be greener. And it might be twice as expensive.
Look, oh, go ahead, Christie. Yeah. I hate to ask this question, Jen, but again, from an absent member this evening, why do we need lights when the sign on the recreation area says fields close at dusk? Yeah, I'm
No,
sorry.
that's
saw
a good
some
question,
humor
but
in the
This
question.
wouldn't, oh, sorry.
Maybe you have to take the sign down. I don't know.
Well, these don't light our fields. These are the lights on the tennis courts, so I don't know, maybe I'm splitting hairs, but the tennis courts, these light primarily the tennis courts and a part of one of the basketball courts.
Yeah. There was just a little humor in that.
No,
Sorry.
no.
Maybe take the sign down.
Is there
you
going to be a
know?
request for more basketball court light?
Yeah, could be. Gene?
I just wanted to clarify, I assume that annualized savings is based on the current rate for electricity, given that we're projected to see a 30% increase, your annualized savings gonna go up 30%.
Right,
That's just,
yep,
Absolutely.
something to think about.
yep,
There'll be an even bigger savings next year.
yep.
Good. Any other questions on this article? Okay.
What is the actual cost of the 12 new light poles as currently presented?
The cost for the material, it is $14,000.
So most of it is in fact our labor. of
Yeah, and
switching
renting the-
outputs.
Yep, so it's the labor, that's a piece of it, but also renting the lift to get up there is a couple of $1,000s. And you also need to pay a service to National Grid to turn off the power while the work is completed.
I mean, we want to be safe.
Yeah, we like our electrician.
Okay.
I don't know. Ask it.
Does DPW not have a lift?
So they do, but the one, or the piece of equipment that they have is not tall enough to reach the light.
Any other questions on this article? So before, Jen, before you leave, again, one of our members who's absent had two questions. One, what is the status of the community splash pad?
Oh, sure. So unfortunately, that has been put on pause. Getting a quote, after getting another quote for the splash pad, it ended up, it was going to be a little bit more money than we had thought. And while we were gonna apply for a grant, the grant that we were applying for, there's a contingency that the space that you are putting your project would have to be would be turned over to conservation pretty much. So Bay State, that wouldn't work there. So it's just on pause for right now. I've released the ARPA money, but you know, it's just, we just have to do a little bit more work.
Thank you.
Yep.
The golf course?
The golf course.
Just thought I'd ask. I mean, is it compatible with the golf course?
Oh, to put a splash pad?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I just think it's the splash pad will be busy and the golf course is very busy. So I just don't think the two could coexist, and golfers tend to like a little bit of quiet, and a bunch of screaming kids in the water might not.
Also, I think there's a parking
Field
problem.
on Mill Pond
Chemicals on
or,
the grass,
you know,
too.
Mill Pond School or something like that?
Possibly. We haven't really scoped out other locations quite yet. I like Bay State because of the tot lot right there. Those two I feel it just feels like a splash pad should go there with that tot lot playground and a splash pad that's geared towards the same age of kids. But I'm open to other locations. We just haven't done enough. We haven't looked into.
It's the
those
conservative
spots, yeah.
part that looking,
Finally, one more question from the person.
Can I just speak to the
Yes.
splash pad?
Oh,
So the
okay.
splash pad, as you know, is not on the town meeting warrant. It's an ARPA project.
Yeah.
And so we're working through that, understanding that we need to commit the remainder of ARPA funds. So there'll be another opportunity to discuss that soon.
Okay. So the one final question is, and either one of you or both can answer this, what's the status of the intergenerational community center listed in the strategic plan?
It's a future project. I mean, one of the things that we're really waiting to understand is the results of our senior
Senior
needs
survey.
assessment
Well, when
be-
is that coming back?
in March. So that, you know, there's discussion, there's always been discussion about it being a multi-generational center, and a couple of the questions in that senior survey were specific around that.
And it's not coming back this month, February? We're not getting the initial results?
No,
Okay.
it's,
Will we have it before town meeting?
I don't know, but there's no intention to put anything on the warrant.
Understandably, but I think that survey, that assessment is important to the finance committee, so we could get a good feel for how our seniors are feeling about taxation, et cetera. And I would hope that when it comes in March, that we have an opportunity to meet with, or to review it with you folks before we go to town meeting.
So absolutely, we would review it. We would definitely come to the finance committee. You know, typically when we get a study like that with recommendations, we work through an implementation plan and then we present that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you can't see it ahead of time, but I guess I would say I would caution not to sort of rely on that in terms of your votes, because I don't think you'll get it in time.
Yeah, no, it's not a question of, in my mind, of relying on it. It's a question of at least having that data coming back, even in raw form, which would help us and keep us informed about, especially around the issue of taxation.
I understand. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know that you'll get it in time that it would change anything for town meeting, because it could
Okay.
come the week before.
All right,
That's all.
okay.
Can I go back to the ARPA?
Yes.
Just real quick?
Yep.
Because they're time-specific funds, right?
Yep.
So if the splash pad is kind of a no-go at this point in time, would you go back and look at projects that people or departments put in for and bring those up rather than lose the funds?
Oh, absolutely. We're not going to lose the funds.
Okay.
So our intention would be, there's a couple different things that we need to understand, and we're working through that. One example is that we funded those 3 police positions. They didn't bring everyone on at that first start date, so there's some savings there of ARPA funds. So trying to understand what that balance is, and then what we did last time is we went back out to department heads and we asked them, to identify their requests at the time. So there's a couple of things that we anticipate money falling down to that bottom line, and we want to understand that before we bring anything back to you. But
Thank you. Anybody else? Jen, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah,
You're
of course,
welcome to
thank you.
stay. You're welcome to stay, and,
Feel
you know,
better.
but we understand if you leave.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay,
All right.
thanks, Jen.
Have a good night, thanks.
You too. Okay, Christy, your presentation
it's
is
finally here. Yeah,
finally here.
So exciting.
it is. It is. I'm afraid to touch it too much. There it is. All right. So this is going back to Article 6. So this is taken right out of the budget book, but it just explains the differences between free cash and stabilization. So free cash is certified after each July 1st by the state. So for example, when we talk about the free cash we use in fiscal 23, we're talking about what was certified at the end of fiscal 22. So sometimes you'll see that in the budget book. It's a little confusing because we can't use it in the year that it certifies. And then with stabilization, as I said, it's that rainy day fund. And that requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting. This has a lot of words on it, but this is best practices. So GFOA, which is the Government Financial Officers Association, that's those are the standards by which we create the budget document every year. They recommend at a minimum that general purpose governments, regardless of size, maintain unrestricted budgetary fund balances, so included in that free cash and stabilization, of no less than 2 months of the regular general fund operating budget. And that's something that we acknowledge in our comprehensive fiscal management policy. So 2 months would be about that 16.7%. So that footnote at the bottom there, I don't need to read it to you, but that's the footnote that comes right out of the comprehensive fiscal management policy. And so we actually our policy actually has a goal of slightly under that, so the 10 to 15%. So that first bullet talks about that 5 to 7% goal for free cash and 5 to 7% goal for stabilization. And then it says that the town will endeavor to maintain those, and it would be appropriated for one-time capital expenses only. Where does free cash come from? I think there's some misconceptions about where free cash comes from. It does absolutely, it comes from unexpended budgets. That is not the only source though. It also comes from local receipts that exceed our estimated receipts. So we talk a lot, just now we were talking about money that comes in from, the fire department, but we're also, there's obviously other ways that money comes in, and we estimate those every year. And then that's how we set the tax rate, because we estimate what we're going to get, and then we look at what we need, and then that delta is what is levied on the taxes. And so if it comes in better, then it increases, then that would fall to free cash, and so that's here. Also, other revenues that might be received during the year, overlay surplus, which we've talked about before, it's not appropriated, and then of course the prior year free cash that rolls forward. There's also items that can reduce free cash. These are not exhaustive lists, but revenue deficits, like local receipt shortfalls. So that was something that we were very concerned about going into COVID, because obviously meals tax, hotel tax, we were concerned about those things. We estimate very conservative. That's what the state wants us to do, and that's what we should do. But if we don't, or we, are wrong in our estimates and they come in lower, then it reduces free cash. This is the reserve fund summary. This is what I showed at both the budget hearing and the budget summit. But just to show that our reserves, our free cash and stabilization, if everything is approved at town meeting as proposed, that we'd be at that 12.69%, so between that 10 and 15% goal. Important to acknowledge that we just talked about Article 4. Article 4 will fund those union contracts for fiscal 23. We need to use free cash for that, so that percentage will drop if we spend additional free cash. Our comprehensive fiscal management policy, as we said, it puts us at a target between 10 and 15% of the general fund. If we go above that, which we have, it's to use money, it advises that we should use that money to lower the tax rate, to fund unfunded liabilities, or to appropriate money to stabilization. This chart is one that you've seen many times, and this shows the growth of free cash in Westborough. The blue, you've seen that's what we certify each year. So again, fiscal 22 that's the money that we're working with at 15.8 million. And then the red bar is how much we've spent, or for this year, how much we expect to spend. So that 4.5 million in free cash. We also added the green bar for this year, which is that 1.8 million for stabilization. So showing that, we typically are just under 20% of our free cash is what we're spending. So this is what the actual article is, which is that 1.8 million. And so it would take our free cash from that 12.59 down to 7.93, so still slightly over. But again, we're basing that transfer on fiscal 23, and this is using our proposed fiscal 24. So it would take that stabilization up to 4.73, so just under the 5%. We also are using free cash to lower the tax rate. So in COVID, that was the first time we had done it since I've been here. And we used the $770,000 to lower the tax rate during COVID. We had a very unexpected, very welcome increase in our Chapter 70 money in fiscal 22. So we were able to close that structural deficit immediately, but that's not something that we expected, nor should we expect it to happen in the future. In fiscal 23, we used $471,259. So very odd number, but that really came out of the recommendation to use $1 million to lower the tax rate. And then any budgetary savings that we saw along the way, we reduced that number. So that was a significant reduction and made our structural deficit smaller than we had anticipated. In fiscal 24, we're proposing the use of $450,000 to lower the tax rate. We are also proposing something that's new, but we've talked about recently, is we're using free cash towards our OPEB, so that unfunded liability, consistent with our comprehensive fiscal management policy. So in fiscal 22, we used $600,000 of free cash. In fiscal 24, we're proposing the $200,000 of free cash and then $200,000 raise and appropriate. Those slides we talked about previously, but this one is new. So one of the things that we've talked about in sort of other conversations is what happens if we drop below the 10%. And so our fiscal management policy does acknowledge that could happen. And so what they're saying, what it advises, is that if we drop below the 10%, that we should only use the amount of free cash that is generated in the following fiscal year. So traditionally that's been a couple $1 million. So if we dropped to the 10%, we would actually reduce, we could run the risk of having sort of less money to be spending in accordance with our policies. This is another slide we show, and I know it raises a lot of questions. So this is the fiscal 22 comparison with our data dashboard communities. As you can see, there's several communities with less free cash than us. There's a couple with more. This is an older slide, so it doesn't show that 15.8, but we always see ourselves at the high end of this slide. And so one of the questions that I've gotten is, why are there other communities not keeping as much free cash? And, some of them might have good bond ratings and things like that. And so I pulled today a couple of their town meeting warrants just to sort of point out some of the impacts of not having the reserves to spend on the things that we typically spend in Westborough. And this is really hard to see, so I apologize.
Just give us some examples.
So this is the town of Sharon, their capital plan. And so so here's an example. There's a tractor on here for $200,000 that is proposed as a borrow. Wireless access points for the school department, $25,000 proposed as a borrow. Educational robots for $30,000 proposed as a borrow. I mean, so these are just examples. I think I'm making my point that in another community that doesn't have the reserves, sometimes the funding source is a borrow. I only have 3 of these, I promise. So this is the capital plan for Southborough. So they are using their receipts reserved for a fire department pickup truck, which we use that for our ambulances, and everything else in their capital plan is being funded through the levy, so raise and appropriate. And then this is the town of Hudson. Right above this Article 8 is their capital plan, which they do use free cash for their capital plan. But this is an example of some other articles that Westborough, given the amount, typically would use free cash. So their air conditioner article, $525,000, that's a borrow. They have the SCBA replacement for the fire department, $450,000, a borrow. So this is just an example. I just think that it's really important to understand when you don't have the reserves to pay, then these decisions to maintain our infrastructure or fund our capital needs are a lot more difficult. So, and that's all I have.
In those towns that you mentioned where they're borrowing, are their taxes higher than ours?
I don't have that slide with me.
I think it's helpful that you clarified for people that might be watching what the sources of free cash are. Because there is a thought that it's only excess funds at the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
But I also think that it's important that people understand that the use of free cash is done in a very thoughtful way.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so, and it does preclude additional borrowing and additional taxation. While it is the taxpayers' money,
Absolutely.
it's being appropriately utilized. And every year that I've made remarks to the town meeting, I try to call out the fact that our fiscal policies have been very thoughtful, and we do stay within those policies to the extent that we can, and I think that's good.
Thanks.
Any other
Mike?
questions? Yes,
Hi, can you hear me?
yes,
Okay.
now, yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
So I guess I would also stay with the free cash thing is that if you have a $120 million budget and you're really good and you estimate your expenses to 99%, you still have 1.2 million. So it's hard to come out with the perfect number. So Christy, I guess I'm getting the sense though that once this is in the reserve fund, part of the point of the reserve fund is the people that judge us financially, for loans and things like that, want to see a certain amount of reserves because you have, you have enough ammunition for when things don't go good still to pay your loans. So, I mean, it seems like it's fair to say, unless things went pretty disastrous, generally you would leave in the the part that's the stabilization fund, that money, other than if it's growing, from interest or something, or investment, maybe to a point where you take money out, but generally, wouldn't that just, barring something major, just sit there usually?
Yes. Yeah, I don't anticipate that we would be using that money unless there was some extraordinary event.
Okay, yeah, I think that helps clarify things too. It's just sort of, it's an extra $20 bill in your wallet, I guess.
Or in your car glove compartment.
Yeah,
Any other
better
questions?
example.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let us move on, please.
Glad it was worth the wait. Okay.
So,
What's the
Art-
next one?
Article 10, the multi-use trail design.
Okay. I have a map of the trail that I'm just gonna put up, so it's a little bit easier to see. So this is the proposed B-Walt trail. This is from the feasibility study that we completed with grant funds, with a match from the community, or from the town. We had a group that took the feasibility study and really created an implementation strategy, which I presented to the select board. And what we were proposing was really what we would call a segmented approach. And that segmented approach would really give us the ability to sort of pick away at trail opportunities. So sometimes we are able to obtain easements through development, for example, or sometimes a development will come in and they're willing to build a portion of the trail. And so we definitely are, excited about those opportunities. We also have opportunities related to grant funding. So that segment 1, that's part of what you've probably heard of as the Otis Street Corridor project. The town has received just under $5 million at this point for that project. You actually worked with the select board to appropriate some ARPA money towards that project. And so inclusive of that project is creation of the trail along segment 1. So when we're looking at what the next piece of this trail is, we're looking at segment 2 so that we can connect to that once it's built. And so we have applied for a Mass Trails grant. It was due at the beginning of February for design for this section of trail. It would be the initial design, so the 25% design phase. We did get a very preliminary estimate of what that would be for this section, and it's $550,000. So we applied for the Mass Trails grant for $440,000 because the town is required to pay 20% match, and so that 110 gets us the 20% match and gets us to comply with the grant. So we won't know if we get the grant until the summer. So we did discuss, should we be asking town meeting for the funds now, or should we wait till October? Given that you typically have 1 year to expend the funds, we wanted to be able to get going as soon as we were made aware of an award.
Any questions? So when all is said and done with the trail, all 6 sections, DPW will maintain it, or who?
So what we've talked about and what I think the Active Transportation and Safety Committee has talked about is the establishment of a friends group. So typically it's sort of a non-town entity that, is interested in helping to maintain the trail. So I'm not going to say that we're not going to pay for anything, but I do think that in terms of maintenance, typically you'll see a friends group that will really help with maintaining of trails.
Okay. Walter?
I have a question, yes. with all that construction going on Otis Street, has the plan for this been integrated into what they're doing in some form? I guess we haven't designed it yet, but I'm kind of curious because, you know, the whole street is either brand new or being worked on.
Yeah, so this article would fund 20% of the design for section 2, so that green section.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's okay. The section 1 is incorporated into that full project.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this article? Okay. Article 14, I'm not even sure we need to discuss it. This seems to be an imposition on the town by the Department of Revenue, full stop.
I mean, yes, it's a requirement. We have to do it every 5 years. It's to ensure, you know, it's a sort of harder look by Department of Revenue and the Board of Local Assessment, or the Bureau of Local Assessment, at the methods of our assessing department. And it's just every year, every town.
And Article 27, I think, is probably a pretty easy one for you to address, and that's the question of closing the town clerk's office on Saturday.
Yeah, so so it's accepting a section of law that's very short, so I'll read it. It says any public office in any town any city or town may remain closed on any or all Saturdays as may be determined from time to time. I'll skip over, in a town by a vote of the town at a special or regular town meeting, and the provisions of Section 9 of Chapter 4 shall apply in the case of such closing of any such office on Saturday to the same extent as if such Saturday were a legal holiday. Meaning that the clerk's office right now, with elections, some of the requirements and deadlines require them to work and be open on a Saturday. If we accept this provision, they would not need to be open on a Saturday, meaning that we're not having to pay overtime for an employee, and just sort of shifting dates for when nomination papers are due or other things.
Any other questions on that, folks? Walter?
Yeah, well, it seems like specifically for elections, there is, I mean, with the early voting or whatever, there is some real advantage to having some Saturday hours. Does this mean they'll won't have any, or they just have the option to do some? Because it seems like for people who are working all week, the opportunity to vote on a Saturday is a real benefit.
So the way the law is written, it says any or all. So my understanding of that is that we would still be able to be open on a Saturday, but that we would not be required when you're looking at the requirements of election laws and the timing of those actions.
So perhaps if there were 3 Saturdays in play or 2, they might be open one, but not the other. They could decide that, I guess.
That's my understanding. I'll follow up with clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my question is very similar to that in terms of, you know, what is the impact on, you know, essentially voting access, and is it considered I'm gonna say the word wrong, an enfranchisement issue if we choose to close on Saturdays? Are we targeting unintentionally some group that then can't have access to the polls in the same way? You know, or disadvantaging a group by not letting them have Saturdays? Because it seems like, again, as Walter just said, I realize it's expensive, don't get me wrong, but that and do we know how much Saturdays were utilized by the community on the ones we did have to do?
I don't have that data. This was recommended by the previous town clerk.
Right, I understand it's
So-
a tax on her office.
No. So my point is I don't have that data, so I can come back or I can get that for you.
Just
That would be
email.
awesome, because knowing how many people actually took advantage of Saturday voting would be worthwhile.
Beth, would you be satisfied with an email response to your question?
Sure, I mean, eventually it needs to be made public, just so people have that information.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I
Emails are
think that
public.
that would be fine for my
Email- yeah.
purposes.
Emails are public record, so,
Oh, okay.
I think maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but I didn't think this was just about being open for Saturday voting, but more of like if you need, to file nomination paper 60
Right.
days before and the 60th day before fell on a Saturday, you could then make it the requirement the day before on Friday and not be open Saturday.
Right.
Isn't that what this,
That
or
was
am I
my,
mistaking
that was
what
my
the
understanding of
intent is here?
the town clerk's intent for asking
So they
us.
could
I
still
don't
be
know how
open
it,
for every Saturday of voting?
but I don't know how it specifically impacts early voting.
Okay,
So it's a good question that we should
okay.
answer.
good. Any other questions on this? Wonderful. Christie, let's see.
Is that it?
Are there any other articles you have to address? I don't think so.
For now.
Any other?
Unless she had comment on the CPA bylaw?
If
Are we having somebody special
We're
on
having,
that?
Shelby Marshall is going to come in
Okay.
and speak to us about that. So, Christie, thank you very, very much for coming in tonight.
Sure.
We appreciate that,
Thank you.
and,
It's a long day for you.
yeah.
I was just gonna give this to you. I only have one copy, but I can make more. It's just of the Division of Local Services, article on free cash
Okay.
that might be interesting to your.
I'll make a copy. I'll
Disseminate.
scan it and disseminate it. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. Moving on, we can move to approval of minutes. You all had a chance to read the minutes of February 9th? Sorry.
No, January 30th.
February,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm one week ahead of myself.
I'm quick,
January-
I'm not that quick.
January 30th, yes? Yeah, can I have a motion to approve?
Don't forget your cord.
Oh, thank you.
Can I have a motion to approve those
So
minutes?
moved?
I have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any
Bradley,
discussion?
second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, we'll go to a vote. Beth?
Blumberg abstain.
Ward, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes?
I guess it's me. Beretti, yes.
Okay, 501.
Okay.
We also have the reserve fund transfer.
No,
There's a reserve fund.
The reserve fund.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Wasn't there some,
Did we miss one?
yeah.
It's not an article, the reserve fund transfer.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah, I
I'm sorry.
forgot. I
Thank you.
Remember.
It's on the agenda.
Yes, my apologies.
It is on the agenda, right?
Okay, so you need 14?
I have it
is-
here.
Yeah,
20,000.
okay. So there's a request for $20,000 to be transferred from our reserve fund, the AFC reserve fund, to the legal fund for legal services. Any further explanation?
I would just say that, that this request is to get us through town meeting, so you should expect to see an article on town meeting for the balance of the year.
Okay,
Um,
all right. So it just covers the next, or the
Cover
previous?
us, yeah, so
Yeah,
this would cover
post.
us for the next couple months, and
Okay.
then
All
there
right.
would be an article.
Any other questions on that? I mean, to the extent that you can, you've
Yeah, I
done it.
mean,
Yeah, I understand.
We've had a lot of, it's been an extraordinary year in terms of, legal fees. I don't expect that this will continue. We don't anticipate increasing our budget for fiscal '24. So, but we do need, we do have just about $3,400 left in the account, so.
Any questions, folks? Okay, we'll go to a vote. It is to,
We need a motion.
yes, I'll make the
Okay.
motion.
Okay.
I move that we transfer from the AFC Reserve Fund the amount of $20,000 to the town, to the legal fund, for the purposes of paying for our legal services incurred to date.
Well, and.
Future.
Well,
And future,
yeah.
sorry. Can I
That's
have a
okay.
question? Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Beth?
Blumberg, yes.
Ford, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Beretti, yes.
6-0.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll sign off on it and leave it
Leave
in
it
the
down.
mailbox.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Grab your water bottle. Christy,
I'm glad you're here.
can't mother you today.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night, Christie. Okay, moving on, we'll do the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve?
We already
We
did
already
them.
did that.
We're all set.
What? We
We
did?
did that.
Oh, for
Yeah.
God's sakes, where the heck am I? I gotta stop drinking before these meetings. This is not good.
Moving ahead, let's review the warrant.
Moving ahead, yeah. Let's go to liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports this evening? Walter?
Yes, I have a liaison report on the library repair project. The library building committee met this week again, and they presented at the capital planning committee, so it's a little bit of a repeat for Andrew, who attends that, but and the LBC will be here on Monday, the 27th, to present in more detail, well, in detail. I'm just giving you an update. So the plan to move forward for repair of the library will be to seek funding to do the work in a series of 3 steps. Step 1 will be at this March town meeting with request for funds for architect, engineer, and OPM services to provide investigation, the schematic design, and a preliminary cost estimate of repairs. The LBC, with help from our architect and OPM, will use this information to make informed recommendations on what should be included in the repair effort. Step 2 will be requesting fund either 7 months or a year later, e.g. October 23 special town meeting or March 24 ATM, depending on how long it takes to get the information, make the informed decisions, and have time to get public comment. And step 2 would be detailed design development, construction documents, and bidding of the repairs. This would allow the library building committee to present confidently a repair cost in step 3. And therefore, step 3 will request funding, and we expect that to be about a year later than when step 2 is funded for the repair, construction, and associated costs. Step 1, in short, allows the LBC to hire an architect and OPM for the schematic design work, so decisions can be made on which items in the scope will be reasonable to do. The architect's fees include structural, fire protection, plumbing, HVAC site, and specialized consultants hired, for example, to do a detailed existing conditions assessment of things like the slate roof, the copper flashings, the brick and stone masonry, and wood windows. Now that we're keeping the building, there'll be a little more attention paid to the state of it, so that can be better and more realistically repaired. Preliminary prioritized scope of work document has been created and will evolve as more information is known in details on the existing building condition in step 1. The library repair project scope of work does not include expansion of footprint. However, it may include reconfiguration of interior spaces to better meet programmatic needs. The article request that will be at this town meeting is approximately $350,000. So that gives you some background, and we'll get more on the 27th.
Any questions? Andrew, you have your hand up?
It was for it's for the liaison report, but actually, Maureen was presenting at the capital planning meeting that we just had right before this meeting. And I did ask the question, this first step would also involve making sure they could get quotes and estimates on things like the electricity, which is really bad, the windows, which I think, I apologize, Walter may have already said, but also things like the disability and the access for things like that. So it's a pretty comprehensive review.
Yeah, like sprinklers and ADA and all that. Yep. We want to understand all that. So and normally, I guess lately, a lot of people have been showing up and just trying to do this in 2 shots, but I think when you're redoing a roof on a building, maybe that's a little more obvious than this was. And I felt, at least at this time, the committee was not in a position to know the relative expense and needs of all the items to do it and just, you know, do a giant, much larger cost for design and then come back for build. So this seemed like the best approach.
Any other questions? Walter, you mentioned something about reconfiguration of some of the space. Is that going to be incidental to the repair? Do you think, or is?
Well, I think some of the ideas are moving some of the areas around, and they've actually done some of that already to mitigate some of the things where they want certain groups in certain areas, but it'd be looked at anyway. I think there's still an interest in adding at least another restroom facility, so that requires some motion of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Andrew, your hand is up, or is that from before?
So we need to do a review of the liaison.
Okay. All right. Any more questions for Walter? Okay. Andrew?
How'd you know? No, I'm just kidding. So Capital Expense Planning Committee did meet, and it was to review a number of items that were brought up, and we've touched on a couple of them here. And I want to let you know that all 5 items have received the go-ahead from the Capital Expense Planning Committee for consideration. Those 5 items were the B-Walt Trail and the $110,000 contingent upon receipt of the approval of the grant for the other $440,000. The library in the amount of approximately $330,000 or $350,000 with greater details forthcoming. There was the change for the rec commission, because we'd actually approved a different set of capital plans for them, but they moved things around because they're interested in getting the tractor sooner. There's 2 others. I'm going to pause here and ask if anyone has any questions. See if I can remember the other 2.
There was Hastings School, I think, in the stormwater
Hastings
stuff.
was discussed, well, yeah, stormwater, that was the big one. Hastings wasn't voted upon because they didn't have a final number. That was it continues to be reviewed. Thank you. And the last one was the stormwater. What I'm affectionately self-referring to as Culvert Palooza, because there's 3 culverts that are looking to be dealt with in Westborough at the cost of about $1 million. And this would be likely a borrow instead of relying on funds at this time that may or may not be approved for the reserve fund that we're talking about setting up specifically for stormwater and the like.
How much money are we talking about, Andrew?
So it was about $1 to $1.1 million for Culvert Palooza.
Okay.
And you're saying it's only 3?
There were 3 culverts in particular that were being addressed here, yes.
Okay.
How many culverts?
They run generally around Upton Road. What's that? I'm sorry?
How many culverts are there in town?
Over 100.
Yeah, there are a lot. I will say that these 3 were called out. The facilities group has done a review of all the assets of the town, and they've force ranked in priority of age and concern and deterioration a number of projects that need looking at, and these culverts have moved to the top of the list as they have articulated why they are being addressed at this time.
Okay.
So from our notes of the stormwater meeting when they came and visited us, when Chris was here, there were 155 culverts that were assessed and 48 not yet assessed. So there's approximately 200 culverts in town.
And we think these are three of the most expensive that we know about?
The most in need of repair, not the most expensive. So the
That's
force rank
what-
was on dealing with them.
Okay.
We're looking, I've seen the culvert presentation twice. We're looking at a very long-term project and well over $100 million over time.
That's what I was wondering, is what its
Yeah.
final,
Yeah, there's a lot of money involved here. There's a lot of infrastructure involved,
right.
so, Anyway, any other questions?
But that's a building we can't see.
Andrew, anything else, sir?
Not at all. I put my hand down.
Okay. Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Okay, all right. Moving on, future draft agendas. I sent out, don't know if you all had a chance to look at it. I sent out our calendar revision 3. I had a conversation with Shelby Marshall, who is going to represent both the CPA committee and the Hockomock Pond committee, and she asked to be moved to February 23rd, which I accommodated. So next week, we are going to have just the Affordable Housing Trust. Alan Endenberg will be, is a trustee and will be representing them. That'll be on Monday. And then on February 16th, since Christie covered the town clerk situation, we will have the economic development folks come in. And on the 23rd, animal control, and then at the same time, Shelby Marshall. The library will be here on the 27th to walk through the detail of what they're hoping to get moving on. And then we've reserved most of March for the schools, DPW, and if the library presents, probably not have to bring them back, and the planning board. And Walter and I talked about having at least an extra week to go through and vote on all the warrants toward the end of March, from the 13th through the 20th. So we'll have 3 opportunities to vote on warrants. But right now, that's it. Pending any other changes, I think we'll be able to stick with this calendar. So we do have a holiday in there, and that's the 20th. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then once the warrant closes on the 28th, we're pretty much locked for our work until the town meeting. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, wonderful. Is there anything else anybody would like to bring up for this evening? Okay. So, let's move to adjourn. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
Have a second from Melanie. We'll take a vote. Beth?
Lumberg, yes.
Board, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Beretti, yes. We are adjourned. See you all next Monday. Thank you, Westborough TV. And good meeting tonight, guys.
Thank you.